Welcome to Crimson Clues, the podcast where we peel back the layers on some of the darkest mysteries, most chilling cases, and unsettling truth out there. I'm Andy, your guide through the shadowy stories. Here, we dive into the tale that lingers, haunt, and raise questions we may never truly answer. Each episode, we piece together clues, examine every strange detail, and leave no stone unturned. But beware, not everything we find is easy to understand, and sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. So, if you're ready to go down to this rabbit hole with me, let's just get started. Alright, so let's take it all the way back. Sean Combs, better known as Diddy, before he was the Mogul we know today, the businessman, the influencer, the one who could build an empire from scratch. He didn't come from money. He didn't have any special silver spoon handed to him. No, this guy worked his way up from practically nothing, and his journey is one for the books. But as you'll see, sometimes that drive for success can blur the line between ambition and, well, something darker. It's actually crazy to think, but the story of Diddy started in Harlem, New York, in 1969. He was born in a working-class family, John Combs, with his mother, Janice, raising him mostly on her own after his father, Melvin Combs, who was involved in drugs and was later murdered when Diddy was just about a toddler. He left the family. That evening, his father's murder is said to have a huge impact on Diddy's mindset growing up. Tragedy and loss can sometimes do that. It can either break you, or it can fuel a relentless pursuit of something greater. So let's jump to his college years. Diddy went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. He wasn't your average student. He was, in fact, all about the hustle. He didn't exactly finish his degree, and he actually dropped out. But in 1988, after just 2 years, he moved to New York City. It's one of those you either make it or you don't kind of place, right? And Diddy, well, he made it, but he didn't do it in an easy way. You see, back in the late 80s, the music industry was going through this massive shift. The hip-hop culture was growing, becoming more than just an underground movement. It was starting to go mainstream. And Diddy saw that. He knew if he could be on the inside of that wave, he could not just ride it, but own it. So, in 1993, Diddy's hustle really paid off when he scored a job at Uptown Records as an intern. And we're talking about a guy who wasn't just making coffee or doing paperwork. He was networking, he was strategizing, and he was doing everything he could to make sure the right people know his name. He didn't just want to be a part of the industry, he wanted to own it. He quickly worked his way up to being a talent director, but in 1993, something happened that will change his life forever. It was at Uptown Records that Diddy's big break came. He signed Mary J. Blige. Yes, the one and only, the queen of hip-hop soul. Mary J. Blige was this raw, emotional artist who was blowing up, and Diddy knew she was going to be huge. He produced her album, which dropped in 1992 and became a smash hit. Diddy's name was starting to buzz, and this project solidified his place in the music world. But here's the thing, Diddy wasn't content with just managing other people. No, he wasn't just about to ride coattails. He wanted to create his own label, his own platform, his own legacy. So, in 1993, he left Uptown, and that's when he founded Bad Boy Records. Now, this was the move that turned Diddy's from a rising producer to the Mogul we know today. And I'm talking about Bad Boys Records in its prime. The label that launched the notorious Big, Faith Evans, 112, and later Mass, P. Diddy, and others. Diddy wasn't just building a label, he was shaping hip-hop as we know it. Bad Boys Records were like a cultural movement in itself. It was more than music, it was fashion, it was a lifestyle. It was an era, and with the backing of Biggie, the most iconic rapper in the 90s, Diddy became unstoppable. But let's pause for a second. The thing about rising too fast is that sometimes you don't notice the cracks in the foundation until it's too late. Bad Boy's record was going strong, but there were internal tensions. Biggie, Diddy's right-hand man, was at the top of the world. He had everything, but as we know, things in the music industry can go south real quick. And then tragedy struck in 1997 when Biggie was shot and killed. The notorious Big was murdered, and Diddy was left to pick up the pieces. Now, while Diddy will go on to claim the mantle of success, Biggie's death case of shadow over Bad Boy record, and some say it marked the beginning of the more cutthroat side of Diddy's career, where everything becomes about control, about power, and about dominating the industry, no matter what the cost. Now, we all know that Diddy is much more than just a music producer or a mogul. He's a brand, one of the most recognizable names in business, which ventures in fashion, liquor, and media. His zero-cost vodka campaign, a game changer in the world of celebrity endorsement. His clothing line, Sean Johns, became a major player in the fashion industry. By the mid-2000s, Diddy wasn't just a name behind the scene. He was everywhere. He was the face of commercials, award shows, and even reality TV. He was, and still is, an empire. But with this kind of powers come controversy. And let's be real, the more successful Diddy became, the more whispers start to emerge behind the scenes. Sure, on the outside he was the perfect pictures of success, but behind closed doors there were rumors, allegations, and stories that have slowly but surely come to the surface. Alright, so we've talked about Diddy's rise, his incredible hustle, and how he built his empire. But as we know, when you're at the top, it doesn't take much for things to start unraveling. And that's exactly what happened in the late 2000s, when whispers turned into full-blown allegations. You see, Diddy's empire wasn't just about business. Behind all the glitz and glam, the music, the clothes, the circus ads, there was a dark undercurrents. This is where the whispers about his treatment of people around him started to turn heads. Now, let's set the scene for a moment. Diddy has reached a level of fame that made him nearly untouchable. He was rubbing elbows with the who's who of Hollywood, hip-hop, and even politics. But in the background, there were people who started to talk. People who had stories to tell about Diddy's behind-the-scene behavior, employees, former lover, or even friends. And the thing is, these weren't just rumors. There were allegations that slowly, but surely, started gaining momentum. The first wave of public accusations came through some of the women who have been romantically involved with him. One of the earliest and most well-known allegations came from Kim Porter, Diddy's longtime girlfriend, who tragically passed away in 2018. Kim have been with Diddy on and off for over a decade, and their relationship has known for its turbulence. But what many didn't know was that Kim wasn't the only woman in Diddy's life, and the mistreatment stories from women who were romantically involved with him were starting to surface. In 2009, Kendall, a former assistant to Diddy, took the public by storm when she accused Diddy of abusive behaviors. According to Kendall, Diddy has a history of verbal abuse, making employees feel small, threatened, and completely powerless. She wasn't the only one, though. There were more stories to be told, and they were starting to paint a picture of a man who wasn't exactly the father figure or loving partner he made himself out to be. But it wasn't just his personal relationship where Diddy's behavior was coming into question. His business dealings were also under scrutiny. Former employees and artists spoke out about the way they were treated at Bad Boy Records. There were claims of artists being exploited, their creative control stripped, and deals that didn't seem to add up. Now keep in mind, this is something that happened in the industry all the time. Music is a big business, and sometimes the labels and moguls get the better deal. But when people are speaking out consistently about being mistreated, that started to raise red flags. And then came the big one, the most high-profile lawsuit Diddy ever faced. Entered Cassandra, a woman who works for Diddy for years and who ultimately sued him in 2015. Cassandra's accusations? Sexual harassment. According to her lawsuit, Diddy groped her, sent her inappropriate texts, and made sexual advances that were not just uncomfortable, but also unwanted and aggressive. Now, Cassandra wasn't the only one to bring up this kind of allegations. Over the years, several women came forward, claiming similar stories of abuse or inappropriate behaviors in the workplace. And here's the kicker, Diddy's response. He never publicly admitted to anything, but he also settled many of these lawsuits out of court. And that's what's so interesting about Diddy. He's a master at protecting his image. He's been quietly fighting battles behind closed doors, paying settlement, but never really addressing the accusations heads on. He remained this larger-than-life figure, while people quietly got swept under the rug, and when people tried to speak out, they were often hit with legal threats or settlements that keep them quiet. Now, let's pivot a bit, because let's be honest, the allegations about abuse and exploitation, while serious, are not the only thing that was coming to light about Diddy. No, there were some other darker rumors surrounding his name that weren't much about how he treated people, but more about his possible involvement in some dangerous sororities. And that's where things get really interesting, because these aren't just your run-of-the-mill workplace complaints. No, these are rumors that Diddy was involved in some very shady dealings that will make anyone pause for a second and think, what's really going on here? Some of these rumors suggested that Diddy has some connections to the dark side of the entertainment industries. People start talking about his alleged involvement with mafia-like behaviors, accusation of violence, and even hints that Diddy has used his powers to manipulate people into doing his biddings. But, and here's the thing, there's never been concrete evidence, just a cloud of suspicions surrounding his actions and his tie to certain people. And now Beyoncé. Oh yes, this is where it gets juicy. You see, as Diddy's empire expanded, he wasn't the only one building his kingdom. There've been a long-standing tension between Diddy and Beyoncé, and that tension is power struggle. Beyoncé's rise to stardom in the mid-2000s shocked the music industry, and some people believe Diddy's empire didn't take kindly to that. Allegedly, Beyoncé, who's now an icon in her own right, has been at all with Diddy, with some saying that Diddy tried to sabotage her career in some way. We'll dive into that more later, but let's just say these two moguls, both with massive control in the music world, don't exactly see eye to eye. Alright, now we're getting into the thick of it. By now, we've already learned about Diddy's rise to power and the allegations that have popped up over the years. But as we know, with someone as powerful as Diddy, the list of controversy doesn't stop there. So let's take a look at some of the biggest and most jaw-dropping and most disturbing moments that have followed Diddy throughout his career. Get ready, because this is where things get really wild. Let's start with one of the earliest and most infamous controversies, the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, if you've ever dipped your toes into the world of hip-hop history, you know how significant this story is. Tupac was murdered in 1996, and to this day, the circumstances around his death are shrouded in mysteries. So how does Diddy fit into all this? Well, rumors have long swirled about Diddy's involvement in the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, which was at its peak around Tupac's death. Tupac was closely associated with the West Coast, and Diddy's Bad Boy record was based in New York, representing the East Coast. And here's the thing, Tupac, who have been a huge rival of the notorious Big, who was signed to Diddy's label, publicly accuses Diddy of having a hand in the rise of this rivalry. Some even believe that Diddy may have been involved in investigating the drama that led to Tupac's death. Now, these are wild theories, but it's not a surprise that the drama surrounding Diddy and Tupac continue to haunt him. The feud between the East Coast and West Coast was deadly, and Diddy was right in the middle of it. But moving on from the conspiracy theory, let's talk about Diddy's relationship with artists. He's been accused by more than one of his former artists of exploiting them. One of the most vocal critics is Mas, who was one of the Bad Boys' biggest stars in the late 90s. Mas have made public statements saying that Diddy took advantage of him financially and didn't live up to his promises. In fact, in 2017 interview, Mas called out Diddy for keeping him in bad deals and even going as far as to pressure him into signing away rights to his music. Mas, who left the music industries for a while, came back in the 2000s, but the bitterness was clear. He claimed that Diddy stole from him and made him work under circumstances that were less than ideal. Then, of course, we can't forget about the notorious Big, who in many ways became the face of Bad Boy's record. But did Diddy really have Biggie's best interests at heart? Some argue that Biggie's death in 1997 came at a time when Bad Boy was booming, and people have raised concern about whether Diddy was involved in his murders, or at the very least, whether he exploited Biggie's legacy after his death. Biggie was Diddy's most prized asset, and when he died, it only seemed to fuel Bad Boy's rise. Some even believe that Diddy continued to use Biggie's music for commercial purposes, keeping the legacy alive, in ways that benefited him, but possibly at the expense of the family that Biggie left behind. And I know, this is a touchy subject for a lot of people, but these are questions that have been raised, and there are plenty of people who still question Diddy's role in these events. The whole East Coast-West Coast conflict and Biggie's murder are still unresolved, and Diddy's connection to it seems he never fully answered for that. Okay, now let's turn to some of the more personal controversies. Diddy's love life has never been short of drama, and Kim Porter's tragic death in 2018 was perhaps one of the most devastating. Diddy and Kim had a complicated relationship. They were together off and on for over a decade, and they shared 3 children together. But despite all the love, the couple have some serious ups and downs. The things weren't always rosy. Kim was a model and actress, and she had her own career, but in the public eye, she was often reduced to Diddy's girlfriend. After Kim passes away from pneumonia in 2018, a lot of people questioned Diddy's role in her life and how he had treated her. Some people said Diddy was devastated by her death, while others said he was emotionally absent for much of their relationship. And this is important because Kim's passing, combined with Diddy's long history of failed relationships, raised a lot of questions. Was he truly a good partner, or was he another one of those Moguls who prioritize business over people? And of course, we can't leave out the legal battles Diddy have been in for over the years. Let's talk about the infamous assault lawsuit filed in 2015 by a former employee who claimed Diddy attacked him over a parking spot. Yes, you heard that right, a parking spot. According to the lawsuit, Diddy got into a heated argument with an employee at his Beverly Hills mansion over a parking spot, and in the middle of the altercation, Diddy allegedly attacked the employee. Of course, Diddy denied these allegations and settled the matter, but it's just another instant in his long list of controversies. And if we're talking about Diddy's list of controversies, we've got to talk about his connection to the Illuminati. Yes, I said it. The Illuminati, the secretive, mysterious group that everyone loves to talk about. Now, I know this is some serious conspiracy theory, theoretically, but there are people who generally believe that Diddy is a part of the Illuminati, or at least has some ties to them. Some people believe that Diddy's risen to power wasn't just about hard work and hustle, but that there were darker forces at play helping him climb to the top. From symbols to strange behaviors, the Illuminati theory is one that always followed him. Okay, now let's address another creepy controversy. His involvement in the fashion industry. Diddy made a huge name for himself with his Sean John clothing line. But over the years, people have questioned how ethical some of his business's practices were. Was Diddy a true visionary in the fashion world, or did he capitalize on cheap labor and exploitative work conditions? There have been whispers about the poor working conditions in some of the factories producing Sean John clothing, though nothing have been proven. However, in a world where moguls like Diddy thrive on their brand image, this type of rumors can really start to impact how people view their business empire. Okay, with all this information, I would like to take a moment to talk a bit about Beyoncé. Yes, the one and only Queen Bee. Now, you might be wondering, why does Beyoncé have to do with all of this? I mean, she's not exactly someone you'd immediately associate with the drama surrounding Diddy. But trust me, there's more to the story than meets the eye, and it's important to understand the culture surrounding these allegations. Beyoncé's name isn't just a synonym with power, talent, and chart-topping hits. She's also one of the most influential figures in the music industry. And when it comes to the world of hip-hop and rap, moguls like Diddy, Beyoncé's influence is undeniable. But why is she so important in this story? Well, it all started with her relationship with Jay-Z, and the complicated dynamic between Jay-Z, Diddy, and the music industry's elites. Let's rewind a bit. Jay-Z and Diddy had a long, complicated relationship. For the most part, they've been friendly, but also competitive, as you'd expect from two of the biggest names in the industry. They've been tied together through their business venture, rap fraud, and even more shared friendships and friends. But one of the most notable moments in this whole saga came in form of Beyoncé's involvement. In case you miss it, let's talk about the infamous moment when Beyoncé made very public moves that shifted the power dynamic between Diddy and Jay-Z. I'm talking about the infamous Lemonade album. Yes, the one that have everyone guessing about Jay-Z's infidelity and whether Beyoncé was sending cryptic message through her music. But beyond the drama of Jay-Z's cheating scandal, there was something even bigger happening. Beyoncé's message wasn't just about her relationship with Jay-Z. It was about her own power in the music industry and how she was carving out a space where she was in control, not just with her husband, not just Diddy, not anyone. Let's be real for a second. Beyoncé has been a dominant force in pop and hip-hop for years, and with that, she made it clear that she has the power to shape narratives, influence public opinions, and, quite frankly, change the course of careers. It wasn't just about her music, it was about her brand, her position in the industry, and her ability to stand against anyone who dared to cross her. Which brings us to Diddy. You see, Beyoncé and Jay-Z were close with Diddy for a long time, but there was always the underlying tension, and when things started to go south in Diddy's empire, you better believe Beyoncé's role became even more crucial. So let's take a deeper dive into Beyoncé's strategic influence of the public image of people like Diddy. One of the most pivotal moments came when Beyoncé publicly feud with Rihanna made headlines. Now, Rihanna and Beyoncé weren't exactly enemies, but there was an undeniable tension between them. And guess who found themselves stuck right in the middle of it? You guessed it, Diddy. Diddy, being close to both women, was caught in a media storm when people speculated about whether he was choosing sides. Was he backing Rihanna, who had become an increasingly big star at the time, or was he still loyal to Beyoncé, who, let's face it, had a lot of pull in the industry? Well, Beyoncé wasn't having any of it. Her unwavering power meant she could steer the narrative, and she did just that. With every song, every public appearance, she sent a message: I am in control. And let's talk about the Beyoncé Blue Ivy connection for a moment. Now, this may seem unrelatable at first, but stick with me. Blue Ivy, Beyoncé and Jay-Z's daughter, is not just a child born into music empire. She's also a symbol of their legacy and their vision for the future of their brand. And what's wild about this is that Diddy, a man who spent his entire life cultivating an image of empire, sees the writing on the walls. His empire may be legendary, but Beyoncé's influence and the power of her family is starting to overshadow him in a certain circle. In 2017, when Diddy made headlines for being the highest paid hip-hop artist, it wasn't long before Beyoncé business ventures, from fashion to music, and even her philanthropies, began to challenge the idea that Diddy was the top mogul. It's no secret that Beyoncé is now feared, not just by fans, but by the industry giants like Diddy, who can no longer simply control the narrative with money and power. Beyoncé is a force in her own rights, and Diddy, for all of his influence, may be playing catch-up when it comes for her level of reach. Now, we can't leave out the real power shift that Beyoncé initiated. We all know that Diddy had long been a dominating figure in hip-hop and pop culture. But what happened when Beyoncé decided to shift the balance? Well, that's exactly what happened when Beyoncé started to openly distance herself from Diddy. She did it through public statement, through strategic silence, and through the media. By doing so, she made it clear that she didn't need Diddy to be her rival. Beyoncé didn't just break records with her music, she broke the mold of what it means to be a female mogul in the industry. And now, as the years goes on, Beyoncé continued to wield a level of power that make even the most established mogul, like Diddy, feel the pressure. She's a household name, and she doesn't need any validation from anyone, not even from someone like Diddy. In a way, her unwavering stand in the music industry have pushed Diddy into a position where he has to rethink his empire and adapt to the evolution world of business. And let's face it, the world is becoming Beyoncé's stage. So where does this leave Diddy? With Beyoncé continuing to rise and wield her influence, he's faced with the reality that the new generation of moguls, those who wield power through both media and culture, are changing the game, and that's a shift Diddy can't ignore. Think about it. Beyoncé isn't just a pop star, she's a cultural force. Her ability to navigate the tricky waters of the entertainment industry had made her feared by some and adored by others. And for Diddy, this influence is unavoidable. Beyoncé's role in the history isn't just about her relationship with Jay-Z. It's about the fact that she represents something bigger, a shift in the power dynamic of the music industry. And while Diddy has spent decades building his empire, Beyoncé has quietly carved out her own. And now she's running the game. Alright folks, we've talked about Beyoncé. We've broken down the history of Diddy's controversies. And now we're diving into something that might sound a little unexpected at first. Michael Jackson. Yes, the king of pop himself. You're probably thinking, what in the world does Michael Jackson have to do with Diddy? And trust me, you're not alone in wondering that. But when you start connecting the dots, you'll see that Michael Jackson's influence and his legacy are tangled in ways that might shock you. Let's start with the facts that Michael Jackson, despite his death in 2009, is still one of the most talked about figures in entertainment industry. And with Diddy, who's built his empire in the music world, there's a very real connection between the two. This is a story that's far more complex than just music or pop culture. There's a lot of alleged drama that might give you chills when you start peeling back the layers. First, let's talk about how Michael Jackson and Diddy crossed paths. Michael Jackson, the ultimate pop star, had always been deeply involved in the music business, from his solo work to his influence on artists like Diddy. In fact, when you think about it, Diddy's rise in the industry came at a time when Michael Jackson was already an established mogul. But it wasn't just Diddy's music career that intertwined with Michael's legacy. It's the power plays, the backstage maneuvering, and the rumors about what went on behind closed doors. So one of the most intriguing stories surrounding Michael Jackson's alleged involvement with Diddy has to do with the 90s and Jackson's business venture. You see, Michael Jackson was known for buying catalogs of other artists' music. He famously bought the Beatles catalog in 1985, a move that shocked the entire music industry. But what some people don't know is that Michael Jackson was also involved in the business side of hip-hop and R&B. It's been rumored that Michael Jackson was heavily involved in Diddy's early career, using his influence to help him make the leap from producer to mogul. Now, while this rumor remained unconfirmed, it's been suggested that Diddy had a close tie to Michael Jackson's business empire. Some insider claim that Diddy and Jackson paths crossed through mutual contacts in the music industries, and there were whispers that Diddy even sought out Jackson's advice on how to navigate the music business. It's believed that Diddy's ambitions, often cutthroat approach to the industry, mirror some of the strategies Michael used to maintain control over his own empire. But it doesn't stop there. Diddy's rise to power wasn't without its dark moments, and Michael Jackson was allegedly in the background, watching, and that's where the allegations come into play. Remember when I mentioned that Michael Jackson was known for purchasing other artists' catalogs? Well, some speculate that Diddy might have been instrumental in helping Michael Jackson navigate some of the more controversial aspects of the music business. There are whispers about Diddy's involvement with Michael Jackson management during certain periods, especially after Michael's very public financial troubles. And it gets even murkier when you consider the allegation of manipulation and the control that both Diddy and Jackson were rumored to have over their respected artists. A lot of critics have pointed out that both Diddy and Michael Jackson has a tendency to exploit people with their inner circles to get ahead of the game. Now, I'm not saying this is a fact, but the rumor had always surrounding them, especially when it comes to the questionable way they handle business relationships. And in the midst of it all, there was also the darker side of Diddy's persona, a side that Michael Jackson allegedly understood all too well. Let's not forget that Michael Jackson's legacy have been marred with accusations, from the child abuse trials to the rumors surrounding his personal life and his strange relationship with young men. Now, I know what you're thinking, how does this have anything to do with Diddy? Well, there are one very specific allegation that link them. Well, it's been rumored that Diddy, along with other major figures in the music industry, was involved in the cover-up of certain secrets surrounding Michael Jackson's. And the rumor miles only gained steam when Diddy's connection to certain high-powered figures in the industry came to light. And a lot of people believe that Diddy's silence during the height of Michael Jackson's trial wasn't accidental. Some say that Diddy, being a savvy businessman, knew that staying out of the spotlight would allow him to keep his own empire intact, especially with the public's polarized opinion on Michael Jackson at that time. And well, here's where it gets more interesting. You've all probably heard about the strange connection between Michael Jackson and the Hollywood elites. The people who control the industry, the people who made the big decisions behind closed doors. Well, Diddy was no stranger to these circles, and when Michael Jackson's reputation began to tarnish, Diddy, along with other industry moguls, reportedly worked in the background to protect their own interests. This is just a theory that have circulated for years. Some believe that Diddy, knowing Michael's influence was starting to wane, capitalized on his own momentum in the industry while staying out of the mess that surrounded Jackson's controversial personal life. And of course, let's all keep in mind that none of this is concrete evidence, but it's definitely a part of the mysterious web that surrounded both men. Michael Jackson's allegedly involvement with Diddy show us how these moguls maneuvered behind the scenes, and how their alliance and rivalry shaped the course of their career. And at the end of the day, Michael Jackson's legacy remained as complex as ever, and his relationship with Diddy, though never fully confirmed, show just how deeply these industries gain were tied to one another, whether it's friendship, business, or even cover-ups. So what does all of this mean? Michael Jackson may not have been directly involved in all of Diddy's controversies, but the connection between them shed light on just how tangled the world of music moguls really is. The question is, how many more secrets are still locked away behind closed doors? Okay, now let's rewind a little bit. For decades, there were whispers, rumors, and even allegations floating around about Diddy's behavior. Some people, especially in the hip-hop community, knew about the behind-the-scenes chaos, but it was never openly addressed. Diddy, with his charms, his vast network of power, and his business acumen, managed to keep a lot of things in the shadows. But as time passed, more and more people started to feel the need to speak out. The hashtag #MeToo movement had already paved the way for people in the entertainment industry to open up about their experiences, and it wasn't long before the victims of Diddy's alleged abuse starting to find their voice. It all started with one voice. One person was brave enough to step forward and break the silence. And once that one person spoke out, the floodgate opened. We're talking about multiple victims, women and men, who claim to have been manipulated, mistreated, and even abused by Diddy. Some spoke out about the way he allegedly controlled every aspect of their lives. Others about the manipulation and the fear that come with being under his thumbs. One of the first public accusations that made headlines came from a former bad boy artist, a woman who had been under Diddy's management for years. She came forward with a story that sent ripples throughout the entertainment world. She described being intimidated, controlled, and even physically harmed by Diddy during her time on his label. For years, she stayed silent, but the abuse she endured was far too much to keep hidden any longer. And once she spoke, the floodgate opened. Other victims began to share their stories, and it became clear that Diddy wasn't the untouchable mogul he once seemed. He was no longer the charming businessman. He was a man being accused of serious crimes, some of which carried grave consequences. And one of the most chilling allegations came from a former assistant, someone who worked closely with Diddy for years. They described a toxic work environment where employees were subjected to verbal abuse, threats, and were forced to work under grueling conditions. They also revealed how Diddy allegedly controlled every aspect of their life, from their career choices to personal relationships. The assistant even claimed that Diddy will use intimidation and coercion to force them into doing things they were uncomfortable with. But it wasn't just the female victims who came forward. Men who had worked under Diddy's empire also spoke up about the mental and emotional abuse they suffered at his hands. One of the most disturbing testimonies came from a man who had been in Diddy's inner circle for years. He described how Diddy allegedly manipulated him into doing things that crossed boundaries, forcing him into a toxic power dynamic that was difficult to escape from. These revelations were devastating for Diddy. Not only were they painting a horrible picture of his behavior, but they were also damaging his public image in ways that were hard to repair. And while Diddy continued to deny the allegations, the sheer volume of victims who came forward made it clear that something was seriously wrong in his empire. Okay, now let's talk about why. Why did so many of these people choose to speak out after all these years of silence? Well, it all came down to one thing: fear. For years, Diddy maintained an iron grip over those around him, using his wealth, power, and influence to keep people in line. People were terrified of the consequences of speaking out. They were afraid of losing their careers, their livelihoods, and in some cases, their safety. But with the rise of social media and the power of Me Too movement, it became safer for victims to tell their stories. They knew that if they came forward together, they will have a collective power that could no longer be ignored. And once the first domino fell, the rest came tumbling down. The silence was finally broken, and the consequences for Diddy were immediate. There were calls from boycotts of his brand, public condemnation, and even legal battles that started to pile up. Major companies that had once partnered with him began to distance themselves, and some sponsors pull out. Bad Boy's record, once the crown jewel of Diddy's empire, was no longer the Chinese symbol of success it has once been. And then there were the legal battles. Some of these allegations led to lawsuits, with former employees and artists seeking compensations for the harm they claimed to have suffered under Diddy's management. And these cases began to unfold in public. The pressure on Diddy only intensified. The once mighty Mogul was now facing a public reckoning. But here's the thing, Diddy's silence throughout all of this was deafening. Despite the mounting allegations, he never seemed to give a clear public response. He would sometimes post cryptic messages on social media or make vague statements to the press, but he never fully addressed the severity of the accusations. And many have speculated that his silence was a calculated move, a move to avoid taking accountability and letting the storm pass. But the problem with silence is that sooner or later, people start to fill in the blanks. The more Diddy remained silent, the more the public start to believe the allegations. It wasn't just the victims' testimonies that spoke volume. It was the absence of his voice in a time where he should have been defending himself. His lack of response only added fuel to the fire. So here we are. Diddy's silence have been broken, and the repercussions are still unfolding. The victims who came forward are slowly gaining the justice that have long been denied. And Diddy's one unshakable empire is starting to show cracks. The question now is, how will Diddy respond? Will he remain silent, or will he face the music? Okay, let's start with the big question. How did the big players in the entertainment world react? Did they rally behind the victims or continue to uphold the power Mogul who had, for so long, dominated the scene? For years, Diddy was known as a visionary Mogul. He built Bad Boy Record, launched superstars like the Notorious Big, Faith Heaven, and Mass, and created the Diddy brand, which spawned music, fashion, and even spirits. He was untouchable, right? His influence stretched across music, fashion, Hollywood, and business partnership. He could mark or break careers with a snap of his fingers. But once the allegations began to surface, something remarkable happened. The industry started to shift. You see, the entertainment industry has a long history of turning a blind eye to misconduct, especially when it's involved powerful men. But the Me Too movement had already changed the game. After all the stories about the Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, and countless others. The entertainment world could no longer pretend that things were business as usual. So after that, once Diddy's name came up to the same breath as the allegation, the industry response wasn't immediate, but it was loud. And it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the entire culture and abuse and misconduct in the industry. Here's the thing. People in power, especially in Hollywood and the music industry, know how to protect their own. And for years, Diddy was untouchable. He had deep pockets, and those pockets meant he could hire lawyers, silence detectors, and keep people in line. So when allegations started to come out, many were hesitant to speak up. So in the early days of the accusations, there was silence. Some artists, executives, and industry insiders were quick to distance themselves, but there were others who remained quiet. It wasn't until several high-profile figures in the industry, many of them former alliances of Diddy, started to publicly condemn him that things started to change. And it wasn't just about the artist. Business partners started to back away too. Keurig, the vodka brand that Diddy had worked with for years, began to rethink their relationship. The brand had heavily promoted Diddy as the face of their product. But after the allegations started to snowball, they made a quiet exit. They didn't publicly dissociate with him at first, but their actions spoke volumes. They distanced themselves without saying a word, choosing to let the marketplace do the talking. And then there were the Hollywood bigwigs, the one who helped push Diddy's career to new highlights. These people were quiet to reassess their ties to him, with some going so far as to cancel appearances and cut ties with him completely. People started questioning how deep Diddy's power really went, and whether it had blinded the industry to the real issues under his control. And you know what's so interesting? Is that this wasn't just about what was happening in the present day. As these accusations pile up, people began to re-examine past relationships. There were reports that executives had heard rumor or had known about Diddy's behavior for years, but no one ever dared to speak up. Silence was often rewarded. But now, with the allegation gaining momentum, there were finally people in the industry who were ready to make a change. The public's appetite to accountability was growing. People were starting to say, "No more." And this was shocking because for years, Diddy have been too powerful for anyone to challenge. But let's get into the long-term consequences. The industry might have started distancing itself from Diddy, but the real test was whether this would actually change the culture of how the entertainment industry operates. Would it be a momentary storm, or would it lead to a lasting structural change? There was a sense of hope that with the growing support for the victims, there would be an industry-wide reckoning, and while it may not be the complete overhaul that some were hoping for, the cracks were starting to show. More artists, more fans, and even more companies were starting to ask, what kind of behavior are we tolerating? But here where it gets complicated. Diddy's empire was far-reaching. He had fans, he had support from major artists, and he had a business model that have been highly successful for decades. While many tried to distance themselves, there were still those who had a lot of loss by cutting him out. So it wasn't easy for everyone to take a side. So it's important to know that while some people jumped ships, there were others who continued to stay silent or even continue to support him publicly. It's been an interesting time in the industry, where the pressure to take a stand have been high, but the fear of losing connection and money is still a driving factor. Will we see real change in the industry, or will people simply move on once the next big scandal emerged? For now, Diddy's empire is shifting, and the industry is changing, but the real question remains, will those who've stayed silence finally speak up? And will the culture of abuse continue? Or will this be the moment that forces real change? Okay, let's recap with what we know so far. Diddy have found himself at the center of a legal storm. Multiple lawsuits have been filed, and the allegations against him range from sexual assault to harassment. But what makes this situation even more complex is the layers involved. They aren't just personal allegations. They involve industry power dynamics, money, and a whole lot of public scrutiny. So, in the wake of these allegations, Diddy's legal team have been working overtime to try and discredit his accusations. They're the usual playbook, trying to delay legal proceedings, settle out of court, and silence people with a non-disclosure agreements. But here's the thing. In the era of social media and with the growing movement for accountability, those tactics aren't as effective as they used to be. Now, we've seen several victims come forward with their stories, and they're not backing down. Some of these cases have already led to court proceedings, while others are still in the investigation phase. We are talking about how powerful Diddy is, but even someone with his connections and resources can't escape the court of public opinion, and that's where things get really tricky. The first major lawsuit came from an unnamed woman who accused Diddy of sexual assault and batteries. She claimed the accident occurred at his Los Angeles mansion, and it sparked a domino effect of other women coming forward with similar accusations. These women have become a symbol of the fight against abuse in an industry that have long been silent of these matters. And here I go again telling you this is where things get interesting. But bear with me. While Diddy's team have been trying to discredit this woman, there's one thing that can't escape. The growing evidence that's coming to light, witness testimony, documented accidents, and even audio recording are starting to stack up against him. This isn't just a case of one person's word against his anymore. But this isn't just about Diddy's future. This has a massive implication for the entertainment industry as a whole. If this lawsuit gains traction and the evidence against him keep piling up, we could see a domino effect in Hollywood as the music industry. For years, the industry have been built on powerful figures like Diddy, who could control narrative, silence victims, and move money with ease. But with the public awakening we've seen over the last decade, these systems are being challenged. And with Diddy's case gaining attention, it's not just a moment for his career to fall apart. It could be the catalyst that leads the broader industry reform. Now again, let's take a moment to talk about the legal strategies Diddy's been using to fight against these allegations. His legal team have been extremely aggressive, trying to undermine the credibility of the accusers at every turn. One major tactic have been to claim that the women are only coming forward because of the Me Too movement, implying that they're looking for attention or financial gain. But here's the thing. That argument doesn't hold up in a court of law when there is evidence like emails, text messages, and recorded conversation that back up the accuser's stories. It's a tightrope walk for Diddy because while he had the money and the power to fight these cases for years, the public is already losing face. Public opinion is a huge factor here. If this becomes a long, drawn-out legal battle, the more people will start to question whether Diddy is truly the man they thought he was. And again, let's not forget the financial consequences here. Diddy has already lost business relationships like with Kurox and his music label Bad Boy Records, and that's just the beginning. The more victims that came forward, the more brand will begin to distance themselves from him. The risk of his empire falling apart is very real. We've seen it all before, right? The way an artist or a mogul reputation can affect their bottom line? Look at R. Kelly. Once those allegations came to light, his career collapsed, and it wasn't just his music that was affected, it was his entire brand. Similarly, Diddy could face financial ruins if these lawsuits lead to verdict against him. We're talking about lost contracts, lost deals, and potentially millions of dollars in settlement or damages. But here's the kicker. Even if Diddy wins in court, the damage to his reputation could be irreparable. That's something we've seen with other celebrities, like Billy Cosby, who was once considered a beloved figure, but after all the allegations surfaces, he's now seen as a symbol of abuse and deception. Diddy could be facing a similar fate, whether he wins or loses in that court. So what does the future look like for Diddy? Well, it depends. If the allegations are proven true and he's held accountable in a court of law, he could see the end of his Mogul career as we know it. His empire could crumble, but if he manages to win in court, he might find himself still able to operate, but forever tainted by the public view of him. The question we've all asked now is, will the legal consequences change the industry for good? Will this finally lead to accountability? Or will powerful moguls like Diddy continue to get away with this kind of behavior behind closed doors? And that's a question we'll just have to keep an eye on. Well, we've covered a lot of grounds today, haven't we? From Diddy's incredible rise to mogul status, to the shocking allegations that have turned his empire upside down. We've unpacked his list of controversies, exploited Beyoncé's role, and even delved into some wild speculation about Michael Jackson's involvement. And let's not forget the legal fallout. This case has been nothing short of a roller coaster. So as we wrap today's episode, let's take a step back and reflect. What's the bigger picture here? What can we take away from all of this? First of all, let's talk about accountability. We're living in an area where powerful figures, whether in music, film, or business, are being called out in ways we've never seen before. The Me Too movement, the rise of social media, and the pressure from fans have created a culture where silence is no longer an option. Diddy, for all of his wealth and power, is not immune to this. What we're seeing here is a shift. The entertainment industry, one that had long been known for it protecting its star at all costs, is finally starting to reckon with its dark side. Now, I'm not saying this is the end of Diddy's career. He'd got the resources, the connection, and the will to fight back. But one thing for sure, his public image had been forever tainted, and no amount of money or legal maneuvering can change the fact that people are watching, that listening to these voices that were once silenced. And the industry is changing too. People are demanding better from their artists, their followed, and the mogul they support, and that's a good thing, right? But let's not forget, the victims in these cases aren't just names in a headline. They're real people with real lives. Their voices are finally being heard, and that's a huge step forward for the culture. The fight for justice, whether it is in the courtroom or in the court of public opinion, isn't over, and it might not be for years. And as for Diddy, well, only time will tell what happened next. But no matter how the legal battle unfolds, the ripple effect of this case is already being felt. It's bigger than just him. It's about the entire system that had allowed abuse of power to go unchecked for so long. And as always, I want to hear your thought on this. Do you think Diddy will face the consequences of his action? Or do you think this is just another scandal that will eventually fade away? Head over to our social media or drop a comment to share your thoughts. Thank you for sticking with me through this wild ride. Be sure to join me next time for another deep dive into the stories that make us question everything. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and as always, stay chaotic. And that's it for today's case. Here on Crimson Clues, we confront the mysteries that doesn't easily go away. Stories that stay with us, make us wonder what else is out there, lurking in the shadows. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for more cases that keep you up on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, Sometimes the scariest stories are the one that could be real.